Global X interviews social entrepreneurs who tackle some of the world's biggest problems. They are pioneers of innovation that benefit humanity.
My name is Mitri. I was born in Bethlehem. I'm a Palestinian, Arab, Christian, and a Lutheran pastor. People think it's confusing and it's contradictory, but actually it's not. I studied in Germany, did there my PhD, came back to Bethlehem 20 years ago, and became pastor of Christmas Lutheran Church in Bethlehem. It's a small Palestinian Lutheran congregation downtown of Bethlehem. April 2nd, 2002. Maybe you remember at that time Israel, the Israeli army, invaded Bethlehem with tanks, and this was later known as the standoff at the Church of the Nativity. Maybe you remember that for 40 days the Church of the Nativity was surrounded by Israeli soldiers, and I was in the middle of that. Our church is located not far from the Church of the Nativity, and this is where the Israeli tanks were stationed. And on that day, in fact, very early on that morning, the Israeli soldiers arrived at our center. And for 13 hours, without much interruption, there was shooting going on around our house. They blew up the staircase to our home. We had three shells in our center, and in fact our center, our compound, was taken over by 300 Israeli soldiers who used it as their military headquarters for 3 days, and they left over $500,000 in destruction when they left. And the most important thing is to see after those 3 days, to see what we have built over 5 years was destroyed within 11 hours. Our conflict is an ongoing conflict, because that moment I still remembered in '67, when I was still, 5 years old, and when Israel invaded Bethlehem the first time, and when my mother took me and we went to the Church of the Nativity to hide there. And then I remember, going through the '73 war with. And then I remembered going, through the first Gulf War, when the Scud missiles were flying from Iraq to Israel, and the Israeli had these masks to protect them. We didn't have any masks, and at that moment my daughter was only 2 months old, and we were afraid if these Scud missiles will have, some chemicals. And my daughter, who is just 2 months, she just, saw the light newly, and she might just vanish, and now again, being 2002, being locked into our home with my 2 daughters and my mother and sister and wife, realizing, 40 years of ongoing conflict. And at that moment I was thinking, would my grandchild most probably have to live again in another war? That was, I would say, something very, very hard to deal with. I'm not optimistic. Actually, I'm pessimistic. When it comes to Israel-Palestine, I'm afraid that 10 years down the road, Palestine will look like a piece of a Swiss cheese where Israel gets the cheese, that is the land, and the Palestinians are pushed in holes. And each of these holes will be surrounded by a wall that is 9 meters high or 25 foot high. An apartheid system with two different legal systems depending on the race. One people controlling everything, the other people controlling almost nothing. I think this is why President Carter called his latest book Palestine Peace, Not Apartheid, because I think really we are going towards a total apartheid system. I distinguish between optimism and hope. So I'm not optimistic for my daughter. Hope is not something we see, hope is something we do. And when I said we are now training future leaders, this is hope. Justice and peace is the only thing which would help also Israel. You know, I mean, I was recently in Minneapolis, and a Jewish person came to my speech and he said, you know, Israeli and Palestinians are very smart people. Let's put our hands together. I said, I agree with putting our hands together, but I don't think we are smart people because we spent so many decades in war. Where is the smartness in all of that?
Global X is also on Social Edge at socialedge.org.